makes unique.
Hey guys, Dominique here. Like, subscribe, share. You know what to do. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Anyway, I want to discuss an old C-SPAN video that I came across. I will link the original video in the description. But I want to discuss this video. It's a video of an author, Edwin Black, discussing his book, The War on the Weak. And it's about the history of eugenics in America. Wild stuff. This might ruffle some feathers, but I hope beyond making people upset, some people upset, that people actually pay attention, think for themselves, and think beyond what the narrative is, beyond what we've been told, right? For many people, these past 2 years, have been a time of awakening. For me, it definitely has, right? I want you to watch it, and I want you to watch it and ask yourself, right? I want you to ask yourself two things. One, who are the real white supremacists in America, right? And in what ways does eugenics still exist in American society?
His latest work, War Against the Weak, chronicles the story of America's decades-long campaign to create a white Nordic master race through eugenics. As part of the campaign, 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized in eugenic efforts organized by American philanthropic organizations such as the Carnegie Institution and the Rockefeller Foundation. In our own mountains of Appalachia, many of these sterilizations took place. The program was then transplanted to Germany, where the Rockefeller Foundation, an American eugenicist, founded and funded Nazi eugenics. To assemble War Against the Weak, Black headed a team of some 50 researchers working in dozens of archives in 4 countries and accumulating some 50,000 documents. And I have to say the documentation in this book is outstanding. Reviews of War Against the Weak are appearing in major U.S. newspapers and magazines right now, such as the New York Times, USA Today, Esquire, and Mother Jones. Reviewers call the book scary and necessary, fierce and compelling, and what may well be the best book ever published about the American eugenics movement. Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin Black.
Now, I'd like to tell you that I'm going to describe what is a 600-page book with 1,500 footnotes. I'm going to summarize as best I can. Most of the information is in the book itself. As I said, I'm happy to be here, but none of you are going to be happy to hear what I have to say. It's not good news. You're going to get angry. You're going to be shocked. And at the end of my discussion, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. First of all, we are talking about eugenics. Now, most people are familiar with Nazi eugenics. This was Hitler's idea for a master race. These ideas were imported into the United States at the turn of the last century, meaning in the early 1900s. Now, what was that time like? It was a time of great racial, ethnic, and demographic upheaval and conflict. What did we have? We had millions of Jews coming in from the East, from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from Poland. We had millions of blacks in the post-Reconstruction and post-Civil War era who were being integrated into United States society. Indians were being integrated into United States society. Millions of Asians had come in from the West as as indentured laborers, and millions of Mexicans were now in U.S. territory as a result of Mexican-American wars, in which we took over a great amount of Mexican territory. And there were a bunch of white guys, some scientists, some wealthy people, men of privilege, people whose names most people don't know, names like Charles Davenport and Harry Laughlin, and they wanted it the way it was. They wanted it the way it was when their fathers were running the country. And
there's been a lot of talk for decades about systemic oppression, systemic white supremacy, right? And the more I begin to learn, the more I begin to dig and investigate and think on my own outside of popular narratives, outside of what's in mainstream media, this is really the narrative that people are running with, the narrative that they are trying to instill and just ingrain into the minds of Black people, is that white supremacists are these white Southern conservatives, right? And then the white liberal progressives are the saviors. The interesting thing about this is that the people behind the eugenics movements were white progressive liberals.
When we say the 20th century, we ask ourselves, who is running the 20th century? The 20th century was being run by guys from the Civil War, just as our 21st century is being run by guys in the post-Vietnam era. And these guys from the post-Civil War period brought all of their racist baggage into the 20th century with them. They considered themselves reformers. They considered themselves liberals, progressives, and utopians. And their idea of a utopia was a world in which no one would exist who did not resemble themselves. They believed that you could breed a better human being in the same way that you could breed a better herd of cattle, a field of wheat, an ear of corn. And consequently, the government agency that put these guys together was the U.S. Department of Agriculture, because they wanted to breed a better species of man also. So these guys obtained immense amounts of corporate philanthropy to back their ideas. I'm talking here about corporate philanthropy engaged in ethnic cleansing. The Carnegie Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Harriman Railroad fortune, pouring the equivalent of millions into the coffers of these gentlemen to establish research facilities on Long Island and elsewhere that would study how best to eliminate all of the defective, unwanted, unfit, and unacceptable types of human beings that they considered eugenically out of bounds. What were some of their methods that they wanted? The first method that they thought about, one of the first, was gas chambers, public gas chambers. Now remember, we're talking about the first 20 years of the 20th century, and they thought that the best idea was to march these guys into public gas chambers in groups, organized on a township or a county or a village basis, and within a period of time, these guys would disappear. But they concluded that our society was not ready for gas chambers. Even still, some individuals freelanced. For instance, there were mental hospitals in Illinois, one in particular that I describe in the book in Lincoln, Illinois, who fed their new patients milk from tubercular cows, and in so doing infected these new patients, and then they allowed them to sleep in open dormitories to cross-infect the others, and by this method they would have a 30 to 40% death rate of new patients. And tuberculosis, of course, was in that era as bad, if not worse, than AIDS is today.
I was pregnant with my first son, and I go to a clinic to find out if I'm pregnant. And the nurse, she says to me, she's like, "Oh, you're pregnant," after they test your urine and stuff. And I was excited, and she just kind of looked at me like, "Oh, you're excited?" But then, I would say 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from the state. It's a benefits card. And I'm like, okay, I didn't apply for a benefits card. So I call the state, and I'm like, okay, well, what are the benefits? It says it's a benefits card, right? I was told that the benefits that New York State was ready to give me was sterilization. Now you think about that for a second. a 30-year-old black woman. You know, they like celebrating us. 30-year-old black woman, right? First pregnancy, newlywed, and the state, I'm pregnant. It's not like I'm trying to get pregnant or I asked for this. Their benefit to me was sterilization. And here's the thing. Here's one of the reasons why I believe eugenics is alive and well today. When I studied Margaret Sanger, when I did my research on her as I was writing my book, one of the things that she advocated for was sterilization, just like the rest of the eugenicists of her day. She advocated for sterilization, especially here in New York City. And here we are today, about 100 years later, and New York is still offering sterilization.
In the main, they believed that euthanasia would not achieve what they wanted to achieve. And so instead, they opted for forced surgical sterilization. And they got it. They obtained legislation in 27 states that forcibly sterilized some 60,000 Americans. In addition to forced surgical sterilization, there was marriage restriction, marriage annulment. If they didn't like who you were married, they unmarried you. And, of course, there was the effort to create concentration camps, which they called farms or colonies, for those who were feeble-minded, so-called feeble-minded, or racially unacceptable. They started out by calling these colonies for the feeble-minded. There were several in New Jersey. Some 60,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized, many without even knowing it. Some, they said, were voluntarily sterilized. They would get some girl from the hills of Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee, and they would ask her, hi, honey, do you like the movies? Do you like the cartoons? She'd say, yeah, I do. Do you mind if we do something to help out your health? She'd say, sure. And they say, fine, voluntary sterilization. Now, it's interesting that when I wrote IBM and the Holocaust, I thought that the famous SS race card that IBM developed for Hitler's SS was born in Nazi Germany. Actually, the prototype of this card was developed originally by IBM New York for the Carnegie Institution of Washington in 1928, a half-decade before Hitler came to power, as part of the 1928 Jamaica Race Crossing Project, as the first step along the way to wiping out the existence of all black people on Earth.
Why isn't this information readily available to Americans? Why isn't this information the truth about eugenics and its disgusting history in America? Why isn't this being taught, especially by the very people who want us all to believe that America is a horrible, racist country? Why aren't they talking about eugenics? Could it be that the system, right? And the system is comprised of the various institutions, right? The major corporations, the media, the colleges, right? Government. Why aren't they teaching this particular era in history, right? This aspect of American history, when they want us all to believe that America is so terrible? Could it be that the same people who run those institutions, the same people who run the systems, are the same people or the descendants of the people who were behind the eugenics movement?
Ultimately, this was not only national policy enshrined in legislation in 27 states, it became the law of the land. And backing it up was fake science and fake academics from the highest corridors of Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Princeton. It was the greatest of our universities that provided the sham science to back up these racists. Now, just so you understand, we are not talking about a bunch of guys running around a pickup truck with a Confederate flag behind them and a gun rack in the back window. We're talking about the brightest and the best, the elite, about the greatest America had to offer. And all these laws were endorsed and debated by 27 legislatures in 27 states. This was not an isolated matter. This was not a matter that never went into to implementation. It was a national attempt to engage in ethnic cleansing, and it was supported by corporate philanthropy.
One of the most famous eugenics or eugenicists was Margaret Sanger, right? We know that she is the founder of what's currently known as Planned Parenthood, right? These are people who wanted to create a master white race. Isn't it interesting that today, with all of the talk around abortion, that there's this narrative that Black women need abortion? They need it. You mean to tell me the same people that wanted to eliminate the Black race are pushing and emphasizing this idea, this notion that Black women need abortion? Doesn't that sound strange to you? But the thing is this, because our society has become so self-absorbed, so selfish, so self-centered, that we will ignore blatant evil. We will ignore evil agendas and people's the real driving factors as to why someone is offering something to us. We'll just take it because it benefits us, right? But we're not looking at the bigger picture here.
At the need for race betterment through controlling these weeds, basically undesirable people.
In 1939, after opening another clinic in Harlem, the birth control activists launched the Negro Project, an initiative supported by Black leaders, such as civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. Critics claim the program used the pretense of better health and family planning for poor Blacks in the South as an attempt to limit the Black race. Ludwig says some on the left grapple with Sanger's past and how to interpret her legacy.
They know when she writes about human weeds, they know that it's repulsive. They know it's disgusting. The left will never abandon Margaret Sanger because if they do, she's the foundation of so many of their views.
Sanger once shared her vision for a preferred race at a women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, writing in her autobiography,
"Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group."
Despite those views, liberals praise Sanger's work while ignoring her history.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
The interesting thing about her is she believed that it was morally wrong for poor people to infect society with their offspring, to poison society by having children. And she wanted to control the population of the poor. Now, she needed to raise money in order to do this, in order to put this agenda into practice. And it was easy for her to raise money from elitists who believe themselves to be better innately than poor people. But it's a much more difficult sell to the poor people you're trying to eradicate. And so the way that they kind of framed it was, oh, this is for family planning. This is actually going to help you because when you're having less children, that means you have more money. That means you have more food. That means you have more room in your house. And this is actually the responsible thing to do. And so they pitched their campaign in a very amiable way to poor people. And it worked. I mean, to this very day, you have a lot of Black women who think that Planned Parenthood is a good thing.
All of a sudden, we were given this free thing from the Society of America, abortion. 78% of your free abortion clinics were placed in Black and urban areas for the purpose of something free of charge from a racist society. As to put it in the words of one pro-abortionist, we don't need so many Negroes anymore. There's no more cotton to pick. These feelings about Black people, this was one way of doing it as a social benefit, if you will. We're here to help you. Black women, and let it be stated, Black women never demonstrated, demanded, or even requested the right to an abortion. We've been asking for the right to decent housing, the right to education, in fact, the right to health care. And all we've been given, free of charge, is the right to kill our unborn child. We are still struggling for equal opportunity. If a black woman walks into a hospital and says she is in need of some sort of medical care, she would be turned away unless she has Medicaid or Blue Cross or or Medicare. But if she asks for an abortion, there are no questions. We will be glad to kill the baby in your womb. It is demeaning to the black woman because when you wanted us, in other words, when we were on the plantation, you snatched the newborn baby from my arms and sold it into slavery. Today, you cut it out of the womb and throw it in the garbage.
Now, some people will push back and say, well, you know, that was the past. You know, eugenics in America is not a thing anymore. I beg to differ. It's just wearing a new face. Actually, it's wearing many new faces.
There were other doctors who would leave newborn infants who were defective or deformed, lying without any help or nutrition on the delivery table. One in particular gained national notoriety. He was called the Black Stork. He was such a hero of the eugenics movement. They actually made a movie about this guy, which you could see at the corner cinema for 25 cents or sometimes a nickel.
It's about infanticide. That's the actual legislation. And you got 44 people over there who want to hide from it and talking euphemisms about abortion because they don't want to defend the indefensible, because you can't defend the indefensible. We're talking about killing babies that are born. That's the actual legislation we're voting on today in the Senate. That's what the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act is. Is it okay in the eyes of the United States Senate for us to say, well, you can't actively kill the little baby. You can't take a pillow and put it over her face and smother her to death, but you can back away and kill her that way. That's what Ralph Northam, the disgraced governor of Virginia, was talking about when he said, well, once the baby's born, if she survives an abortion, and we wish that hadn't happened, then we'll figure out a way to keep her calm for a little while the doctors debate what they want to do.
Fertility rates around the world just happen to be declining, according to this article. Could it be the food? Could it be vaccines? Could it be medication? Ah, yes, climate change. Want to do your part to stop climate change? Why don't you have less children? Matter of fact, why don't you pledge to only have 2 children? Want to take it a step further? Why don't you go ahead and sterilize yourself? You see, these are things that are actually happening. And some of you will hear that, you'll read these articles and you say, well, that's their business, that's their right to choose, that's their decision. And you know what? In these cases, I completely agree. But here's the thing. It would be naive of you to believe that these stories just happen to make the news. No, this is how propaganda and changing the culture and changing mindsets, this is how it happens and this is where it begins. Oh, and fentanyl. In New York City, they want you to be empowered. Don't be ashamed that you're using fentanyl. Be empowered. And don't use it alone. Make sure you take turns and share. Oh, just forget the fact that fentanyl can cause death and is a leading cause of death amongst young people. Just forget that part, okay? Just forget that part and you go ahead on and be empowered.
Can a man become a woman?
I'm not a woman, so I can't really answer that.
Women only know what women are.
Are you a cat?
No.
Can you tell me what a cat is? Do you want to tell us what a woman is?
I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male. I will never be a man.
And so they go on the internet and they're told that all of their problems will be solved if they become a man.
So you worry that there could be a sort of social contagion element of this?
A teeny tiny bit, maybe.
It got me at 42.
Arming it with hormones that have never been used in this way.
Puberty blockers, which are completely reversible.
Completely reversible.
One of the drugs used is Lupron, right? Which has actually been used to chemically castrate sex offenders.
You know what? I'm not sure that we should continue with this interview.
You don't want to talk about the drugs that you give to kids, or?
Hi, my name's Erin Friday. I'm a Democrat and I voted for same-sex marriage. I'm one of the leads of Our Duty and parents of ROGD kids. There are thousands of parents in our group. You need to be 100% confident that sterilizing children is truly life-saving. The number of kids going to gender clinics is skyrocketing. In the UK, it is a 5,000% uptick for girls, as seen in the graph. It's the same here. We parents know it's a social contagion as we watch clusters of friend groups come out as trans. It's not organic. If trans medicine prevents suicide, why then, as trans medicine gets more prevalent, are more girls committing suicide? Why are they suffering from severe depression, engaging in self-harm? This gene twinge graph of suicide and self-harm matches the trans medicine trajectory.
The left, or what some people will call liberal, Democrat, progressives, they all vote Democrat, right? They run tech. They run government at this moment. They run media. They run the music industry. If you believe that systemic racism exists, then you have to look at who runs the system. Could it be that they want us so busy contending and fighting with and fearing Americans who are a lot like us, right? Who don't have political power aside from voting, who aren't sitting in seats of power, who aren't running these institutions or even running the systems, right? They want us so focused on them, right? The white Southerner or the white conservative, to distract us from what they're doing.
There would be what they called an acción. That means an action. The Nazis would want 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 Jews to kill or to work or to experiment on, and they would just see someone crossing the street and they would grab them. Well, 10 to 20 years before this was going on, they were doing this in Virginia with white people. They were in the back roads of the foothills. The county wagon would cruise up and down. They would see a hillbilly just laying by the side of the road, or maybe fishing or having lunch. They would grab him. They would deem that he was genetically or eugenically unfit. They would find out where his cabin was back in the hills and hollers. Get the entire family, maybe 10 or 12 people, commit them all to the institution for the feeble-minded, and forcibly sterilized them all. And this, of course, was officially sanctioned by the state of Virginia.
Watch this. Poor black and poor white, and so I hear a lot about white privilege, and I'm like, fuck, missed that. I mean, I knew some motherfuckers with sweaters, okay?
I've been saying this, y'all.
Don't get me wrong, you know?
Economic privilege.
I was 2 tank tops in the winter. And my black friends will get mad at me, man. Like, man, look what you did to us, man. Look what you did to us.
That's just wild.
Like, bro, do you think I would do all that shit and move right next door, bro? Now, we gonna split these plums or not,
Make it make sense, yo.
Fucking, we're down here together, dude. You think I took all your shit and just don't have it? Somebody else has both of our shit.
Yeah, totally.
And they're watching us fight over it.
unique.